test drive is made possible by Flow. Learn more about EV charging done right at flow.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Oh, hello there. You join us on the first real day of our road trip. We're taking this 2024 BMW i7 M70 from our little hometown in St. Thomas, Ontario, up to a little village in north-ish Quebec called Maniwaki. It's just about an hour and a half north of Ottawa. Now, this is a really interesting road trip to be doing because unlike when we did it in Michigan with the Lyric, I'd say we have a little bit better opportunities to charge this vehicle. So I'd like to give you a bit of a recap because we are here today in Napanee, Ontario. We drove all day yesterday. We were leaving pretty late in the day. A lot of traffic through the GTA, but we got some pretty interesting results and I'd like to share them with you as we start off our road trip. So we had this vehicle charged up to 90% when we left the house. We did 460.8 kilometers of driving yesterday. So that's from there through Hamilton up into the GTA, stopped a little bit to eat. And because of the traffic, we used up more electricity than anticipated. So we ended up having to use a Flow DC fast charger just outside of Whitby. That cost us not too bad. It was $13.79 to get 35.71 kilowatt hours of electricity, which was about 39 cents per kilowatt hour. So then we then drove from there to our hotel here in Napanee, where they have both DC fast charging and AC chargers. So I just plugged this in, kind of calculated exactly how much range we needed to have to get here and also be able to charge it up. So I woke up this morning at 7 o'clock, just as the vehicle had finished charging. We got $19.77 for that charge, 79.54 kilowatt hours of electricity, which was about 25 cents for the overall per kilowatt hour cost. Now, unlike the Lyric, when we took that, there is no gas version. The BMW 7 Series, though, we have tested it. When we drove that vehicle earlier in this season, it completed our test loop in 9.4 liters per 100 kilometers. This i7 completed our test loop in 19.1 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, but used 21.1 kilowatt hours on average during our drive. That's 2 extra people and luggage. So I figure the 9.4 liters per 100 kilometers with the 760 roughly translates to 11.5 liters of driving in traffic and extra weight to it. So we would have used 53 liters of fuel yesterday. Premium here in Napanee this morning is $1.79.6, which means we would have used $95 of premium fuel to get this vehicle charged up, whereas we've only used $33 of electricity. Now the next step of our drive is to go from here in Napanee to Ottawa, have breakfast, head up to Maniwaki, Quebec, where we're going to be driving about another 375 kilometers. Car currently has about 510 fully charged, so we don't need to stop on the way. And then we're going to get there. We'll talk a little bit more about how this vehicle has been to live with on a road trip and continue on with us as we drive around in the BMW i7 M70. It's 6:25 p.m. on a Sunday. Do you know where your children are? Well, I do. They're here at the hotel because we have finished our second full day of our road trip with the BMW i7 M70. We're in Maniwaki, Quebec, which is almost 2 hours north of Ottawa, depending on how quick you drive. It was about 150-ish kilometers or so in order to get here from Ottawa. We had a quick break after our last rendezvous, you and I together. And a couple of things I want to talk about. First of all, our drive from the Napanee Hotel to here was mostly done by the car. I didn't have to do much. We didn't talk about it in my review, but the BMW Assistant Plus driving system works very well. It is a hands-free but focused attention on the road driving aid. It allows you to go on the highways without having to worry as much about the drive. The car will do a lot of the driving for you. Keep you in the lane, keep the speed based on whatever you've set it to, and you can also do lane changing. All you have to do is just hit the turn signal and it will move the vehicle over. Now, there's one thing I've noticed about it. I do find that when the vehicle moves over into those lanes, it goes just a little too far. So if you're turning left, it goes a little too far left and then has to recorrect back into the center. And same thing if it goes to the right, it just has to correct a little bit. But for the most part, it has worked extremely well. Compared to our last road trip when we took the Cadillac Lyric using Super Cruise, I'd say that Super Cruise has more mapped roads, and it does work just a little bit more seamlessly. However, the BMW system does allow you to make those lane changes quite a bit quicker. I found with the Cadillac Super Cruise system, it's really slow. So BMW quicker lane changing just maybe needs to map out exactly where those lanes end to be right in the center. Now, let me tell you a little bit about how our road trip has gone so far, because we finished another leg of our drive. So, day 2, we spent $21. We drove 420 kilometers. When we got here to Maniwaki, I think we still had about, I'd say about 30% battery. And I just wanted to make sure if we were doing anything in town that we'd had enough to get around. So we used a DC fast charger here at the Galerie de Maniwaki. It was a flow charger. We used 15.3 kilowatt hours for 35 cents essentially per kilowatt hour. Cost me $5.50. We were there for, I don't know, maybe like 25 minutes or something like that. And then the hotel. This is key, guys, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. Here at the hotel, a Flow Level 2 charger rated at 6.2 kilowatts. We charged this up for 89.4 kilowatt hours. So basically we got to the hotel, plugged it in, and I went to bed. It cost me $15.51, or about 17 cents per kilowatt hour. Now this one is a $1 per hour, so that's how the price has been a little bit lower than it was anywhere else. But it brings me really neatly into the next thing that I want to talk about, because we've road tripped the i7. Now we've talked about a little bit about how our charging has gone, but it really comes down to commercial businesses and places like hotels getting on board. Now here we have a pretty standard Flow commercial unit. We've seen these all over the place. Dealerships have them, commercial places like this hotel, businesses, whatever it may be, they've got these units, and it's great because all I have to do when I'm charging my vehicle is go and tap my card or use my app. So for example here, I'm not going to show you the number on it, but I could just tap that and it would get going, and I can have my car plugged in and ready to go. Now we've talked quite a bit over the years about home charging, and Flow offers a fantastic home charging solution, both for vehicles like this. You can have Tesla adapters, whatever it may be, and they're now producing more powerful versions. So if you want to get closer to a 19 kilowatt home charger, the options are there. This i7 can take up to 11 kilowatts on an AC charging unit, so you could get one of those from Flow. But I want to talk about commercial places like hotels. More and more people need to get on board with this. The only reason we picked this hotel was because of this. And I mean, $15 to charge this up overnight. I know it sounds like a lot when you compare it to at home, but when you compare it to a road trip, we have spent now, what, $21 today, $33 yesterday. We've spent $54. Can you imagine if we had driven 880 kilometers in a BMW 7 Series that was powered by that 4.4 liter twin turbo V8? We already talked about we would have spent $95 in gas alone. I would have spent another probably $60, $70 in gas today. I've spent $50 in electricity, but more businesses need to get on board. So yes, while our video is brought to you by Flow and the amazing solutions that they have for home use, they have great solutions if you are a business. So check it out. If you are a hotel, if you're a convenience store, if you're a mall, anywhere, places that people are going to be going that have electric cars, they want to see you getting involved with electrifying our country. So check out flow.com, not only for your home use, but also commercial stuff. Now, we've been driving the i7 around a little bit today, not quite as much as we had planned, because we're here in town. The whole point was coming to Maniwaki. We've explored the town, we've seen some family, we've driven around. I've maybe done 60, 70 kilometers of driving here today. So the car has been plugged in for about 2 hours now. It's only going to cost me $5 or $6 to get this charged back up to 100%. So tomorrow morning when we head out to head back home, we're good to go, and we've still spent $60 so far in electricity. Can't get better than that. So join me as we continue on the remainder of our road trip. We'll talk a little bit on the road, tell you how the car has been, and if you're curious to know a little bit more about how the i7 M70 xDrive has been, we do have our full review of the vehicle up on our YouTube channel, so you can check that out. But for now, we're going to go to bed, and you can join us on the final leg of our road trip. All right, my friends, we're here on the 4th morning of our road trip. We're heading home, trying to get ahead of the rush as we get out of Quebec, through Ottawa, and then the inevitable traffic we're going to hit in the Greater Toronto area. But I just want to talk a little bit about our final day of charging before we head home. So yesterday we didn't do a ton of driving. We did about 95 kilometers of driving just around town here. We only used the car charger at the hotel, and it cost me $5.02, which I think is pretty good. So we're averaging for our total cost so far just under $60 Canadian, and we have driven 976 kilometers, which again, comparable 7 Series, you're not going to get that with premium fuel especially, but it's been extremely efficient. So now our drive home will consist of some logistics. I planned everything out last night. There's not a ton of 50 plus kilowatt hour chargers along the 401. I only found one in Kingston. It's at a dealership, so it's not ideal, but we're going to be stopping there after about 310 kilometers, but Google's trying to take us on the most energy efficient route. I'm going to go on the fastest route because I figure if we use up an extra 25 kilometers of electricity, we will be able to recuperate that at the level 100 charger. I figure we'll be able to recuperate that at the 100 kilowatt charger rather than finding a 50 kilowatt. So this morning we started off, car said it had about 500 kilometers of range. We are in efficient mode, saying that that's what we're getting. So we will be charging up with about 170 kilometers of range, and then we're going to have to stop again, I figure, just outside of Toronto on the west side, so closer to where we're going to be. So 2 stops, about 775 kilometers of total driving today, and the car's going to be doing a lot of it as we use the Driving Assist Plus system on here, but it's going to be a nice little comfortable drive for us to get home, and then we'll wrap up everything about our road trip to Maniwaki here with the i7 M70. Well, friends, it's the morning I have to drive the BMW back. Happens to be the day after we arrived home, and I have to say, it was a lot of driving. We did a lot of driving yesterday. Not necessarily something I like doing. It doesn't really matter which car I'm in. It just doesn't get any easier, especially when there's traffic. So yesterday, we left our hotel in Maniwaki around 7 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't get home here in St. Thomas until about 6 p.m. at night. That's 11 hours of being on the road. Most of that is driving. There was some of it where we were charging, but most of it was driving, and then some of it through not even the GTA, but getting out of like Belleville. There was just tons of traffic. It was insane. So it was really good to be home. Nothing feels better than getting home, especially after a very busy weekend away from the house. So we're back. So let's go over some of the information here. There's 2 things we're going to be going over today. We're going to go over our final day of driving, and then we're going to go over everything. Not going to recap it. I want to just talk about what we did total for the week. So when we took our car yesterday in the morning, it was fully charged, which was nice. We didn't do much driving the day before, so that was no problemo, but we headed out from our hotel, and like I said, I planned things out a little bit better. So our original plan was to drive about 310 kilometers from our hotel in Maniwaki to our first charging destination in Kingston. However, that would have taken us kind of through the back roads, like Highway 7. If you're familiar with the area, Highway 7 would have gone down, would have taken back roads the whole way. Yes, it would have been less distance, but it would have been more time. So I decided to spend 337 kilometers of driving to get to the destination about 25 minutes earlier, which would have been fine, right? Because we're going to plug it into a fast charger. We'll get those 25 minutes of charging that we would have gotten if we hadn't used, like, if I hadn't driven those extra 20-ish kilometers, we'll get them back in minutes at a fast charger. So we decided to get there a little quicker and charge for a little bit longer. So that worked out fine. There are quite a few car chargers in Kingston. I wouldn't say it's the greatest area for it, but there were enough to be able to get us charged up. So we stopped at the Nissan dealership. They actually had a 100 kilowatt flow charger. So we charged up there. We used 63 kilowatt hours of electricity, 63.88 to be a little bit more precise. Total cost for that was about 38 cents, 39 cents per kilowatt hour. So it was $24.82, which wasn't too bad overall. Now, the dealership is kind of located around some strip mall areas. So we parked the car. There's no gate or anything, so it's great. We just parked it at the back. Not the most convenient place for parking. It's right in the middle of their service area, so I don't see how well that would work during normal operating hours, but plugged the car in, walked across the street essentially to have some lunch, and torrential downpour during that time wasn't great to be walking around in. So yeah, the convenience of that location wasn't, I wouldn't give it like a 10 out of 10. It was more like an 8. There was at least a couple things to do around there, but it's always nice if the charging station you're parking at actually has what you need to be able to, kill your time. So I think we were there for like 40 minutes or so. The car was averaging like around 75 kilowatts originally, and then by the time we unplugged it, it was closer to 84 kilowatts, so not bad whatsoever. We do have an option in the car to prepare the vehicle for DC fast charging. It pretty much always says it's ready. If I go in to the actual driving settings of the vehicle, the actual charging settings, it'll pop up and tell me, like if I go in right now, precondition the battery, I can activate it once. Car's at 86% right now, so it doesn't necessarily need it, but it's good to have, and we did use that pretty much every time we went to a DC fast charger. I did make sure we enabled that. So now our next drive was supposed to get us all the way through the GTA. The plan was to go from Kingston all the way to Milton, Ontario, where there was another Flow DC fast charger at a Canadian Tire just off the 401. That didn't work out the way that we were planning to. We stopped several times. On a road trip, you need to use the facilities, and with 3 people in the car, everybody needs to go pretty often. So we stopped at the en routes, and this will be a very short but concise rant about the IV charging network. I have had non-stop issues with these charging stations. Anywhere I've used them, I've tried to use a lot of them, and they've never worked. So we stopped at the first en route. That was Mallory Town. All 4 chargers, well, actually 3 chargers of the 4 were offline. One guy was able to get the 50 kilowatt to work, so that's pretty useless. We then drove to the next one, Trenton. When I got there, all 4 of them were offline. They said they were doing maintenance on it. I had posted something on Instagram, and then magically, a couple of them came back online. So between the time I was shuffling between the different stations with the car, I could have plugged it in and got going. So I wasted like 7 or 8 minutes before I actually got the car charging. Now, I used a 100 kilowatt charger. It started off around 100, it said I think 142, and then dropped down to 41 kilowatts, and it stayed at 41 kilowatts the rest of the time. I hate those chargers, and I think the only reason the government of Ontario went with them for all of the en routes is because of cost. They were probably the cheapest, and now we're suffering for it. So we stayed there until the vehicle got to about 84%, because that would have gotten us all the way home without stopping again. So we did. We charged it up. That was a much more expensive charge at 62 cents per kilowatt hour. That's almost double what we just paid for a much faster charge in Kingston. So we spent only $12.81. I know it sounds like a very small amount of money, but again, we only had driven about 95 kilometers from Kingston to Trenton, so we were now at 84%. It said at the time 100 kilometers of what I would say surplus. We had 450 kilometers of range. We needed to drive 350 kilometers to get home. But that didn't work out that way, because we got closer to the GTA and traffic was just getting worse and worse. So I decided to take the 407. That was an extra 35 kilometers of driving that we didn't necessarily need to do, but it allowed us to get home like almost 45 minutes earlier than had we taken the regular 401 route. So we drove all the way up the 407, came back down, got to the other side of the GTA. I thought about stopping at the Canadian Tire, but it wasn't convenient. Never was going to be convenient, because it's off the highway. There's nothing to do there. We ended up stopping again at the Cambridge en route. Final time I'll mention IV. All of the chargers were offline again. This time they all showed online. I plugged in the car, and it took my money, and then it failed to charge the vehicle. It kept crashing or kept giving me error messages, and the other people who had came with their vehicles as well all had problems. So good job, team. It's really important if you've got stations along a major highway route, especially the 401, which is considered to be the busiest and most important connecting highway in North America. It's kind of important to have those working. So you guys got to do better. We got home, 11% state of charge. Was pretty good. It was getting kind of closer, I'll admit. It wasn't the most enjoyable experience getting down, and we were getting to the point where it was like 30 kilometers of surplus. It's a little nail biting at that point, but it worked out. We got home, 11% state of charge, plugged the car in immediately when I got home. And just like we did when we did our Michigan road trip, I wanted to include the cost of getting the car back to 100%. So then that way, you know, we started off at 100%. It would have only cost me $7 or $8 total had the car been at zero, but you know, we started off at 100%, we finished off at 100%. So at home, that's the most cost effective. It would have only cost me $7.66 last night. The charge was off peak hours, and then we charged it again from zero. The total amount of driving that we did yesterday, 775 kilometers, cost me $37.63 of DC fast charging. So a little bit more money, but we were driving, you know, again, all at once to get home. So the total cost of the trip, not including the home charge, so everything to get to and from and back and everything without charging it up at home, cost me $97.22. Add on that extra $7 at home, $104.88 to go 1,750 kilometers. That's really good. Think about that for a minute. $104, and we did 1,750 kilometers of driving. Now, the way that I've calculated it out, and you can let me know if my math is off by a little bit, but again, when we first stopped in Napanee, I had mentioned that gas, there was $1.79.6 for premium, because we can compare a fully electric 7 Series to a fully gas 7 Series. They're the same kind of car. So if you were to drive a 760i xDrive, you'd be putting in premium fuel. You'd be using, as according to my calculations, to get the same amount of fuel out of that $104.88 that we spent, you would have gotten 58.39 liters of fuel. That's not much. Now, we discussed before, you know, maybe averaging around 11.5 liters per 100 kilometers. You know, we were driving a lot of up and down hills. We had a lot of traffic. We had a lot of stop and go. We had 4 passengers in the vehicle for a period of time. So, you know, comparing the car, it doesn't matter what, you know, average you think that car could have done. You know, even if you did 10 liters per 100 kilometers on that BMW 7 Series, there's no way you're getting anywhere close to how much we spent this week, because to get the same equivalency, this vehicle essentially was 3.34 liters equivalent per 100 kilometers. The way I calculated it out is 58 liters per 1,750 kilometers. But we don't obviously discuss how efficient vehicles are in that way, so you have to divide both sides by 17.5 to get the liters per 100 kilometers, which would have been 3.34. So I mean, this was a win, 100%. Undisputed, this vehicle is more efficient than any other vehicle you could have taken, any other gas or even a plug-in hybrid vehicle. This costs less to operate than if you had a gas vehicle, especially a gas 7 Series. Now, were there downtimes? I'd say the only real downtime that we had was when we were at the en route the first time that we charged yesterday. Because every other time, the first time we charged up on our original drive to Napanee, we were eating dinner when we were charging. Got to the hotel, it was charging overnight. We got to the hotel in Maniwaki, it was charging overnight. We didn't do much in Maniwaki, but still, it charged while we were at the hotel, swimming, eating, whatever it may be. Coming home, again, we stopped somewhere. It wasn't the most convenient, but we still had lunch and everything. So is it as convenient as driving a fully gas vehicle or a hybrid vehicle or even a plug-in hybrid vehicle? No. But we've talked about before how at home these vehicles are fantastic. If you're doing 500 kilometers or less per day, this is the way to go. It's the way that I would go because I don't do a lot of driving during the day. But here we are, we've done 1,750 kilometers in the course of 3 days, almost exactly 72 hours. We did 1,750 kilometers, and it only cost $104 Canadian to do it. I've driven this car, before getting in here this morning, 2,600 kilometers total. I spent a lot of time with this car, and at home, it cost me maybe $20 of electricity to do all of that, $30 at the most. I did do, drove home with the vehicle. I drove out to Hamilton. I did a lot of driving with this car. So even if it was $30, for this vehicle to have cost me $104 $34 to drive 2,600 kilometers during this week. Unbeatable. It is unbeatable. Now, I would like to again thank BMW Canada for letting us have the opportunity to take the i7, giving us, the opportunity to show off what this vehicle is capable of, showing Canadians and others that it is possible to road trip not only a fully electric vehicle, but a fully electric luxury flagship sedan such as this. I'd also like to thank Flow for sponsoring this video. Without them, it would not have been possible. They allowed us to do this trip as cost effectively as possible. And as I mentioned, every single time that we have used a Flow charger in the public area, it has always worked. And as you saw with our calculations, they were often, almost every time, the most affordable. So big thanks to Flow. You can find out more information about both their home and commercial solutions at flow.com. I highly recommend it. But this has been a great week, a win for sure. And I always say, if you have questions about this vehicle, please let us know in the comments below. We do get back to everybody that we can. Subscribe to the channel. You can see here, I haven't even been driving the car the entire time. The Assist Plus system on this 7 Series has been fantastic. It does lane changes, so if you have questions about any of that stuff, anything about the car, anything about the road trip, we'll get back to you as quickly as we can in the comments. But until next time, we appreciate you watching, and take care.